John Carter had always believed in duty, honor, and sacrifice. As a soldier, he had spent years away from home, serving his country in some of the most dangerous places on earth. But nothing, not the long nights, the harsh conditions, or even the constant threat of danger, could have prepared him for what awaited him when he finally returned home. The day John stepped off the plane, his heart was pounding with excitement. He had dreamed of this moment for years, the warm embrace of his wife, Emily, the familiar comfort of his own bed, and the simple joy of being back in the town he called home. But as he walked through the airport, something felt off. Emily wasn't there to greet him. No sign of his best friend Mike, either. Just an eerie silence that made his stomach twist with unease. John tried to shake the feeling. Maybe Emily was running late. Maybe Mike was tied up with work. He told himself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But deep down, a nagging voice whispered that something was terribly wrong. As he drove through the quiet streets of his hometown, memories flooded his mind. He remembered the day he left for deployment, Emily's tearful goodbye, Mike's promise to look after her, and the hope that one day he'd return to the life he had left behind. But now, as he pulled into his driveway, the house looked different. The garden was overgrown, the curtains were drawn, and there was an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. John's heart raced as he stepped out of the car. The front door was unlocked and the house was eerily quiet. He called out for Emily, but there was no answer. The living room was empty, the furniture rearranged, and the photos on the walls were gone. His eyes landed on a single picture frame lying face down on the mantelpiece. With trembling hands, he picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of Emily, but she wasn't alone. She was standing next to Mike, both of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. John's breath caught in his throat. The date on the photo was just a few months ago. His hands shook as he dropped the frame, the glass shattering on the floor. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. John's mind raced as he stumbled through the house, searching for answers. He found more photos, more evidence of a life that had moved on without him. And then in the bedroom he found the final blow, a wedding ring on the nightstand, engraved with two names, Emily and Mike. John sank to his knees, his world crumbling around him. The woman he loved, the friend he trusted, they had betrayed him in the worst possible way. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning, because John Carter wasn't the kind of man to let something like this go unanswered. And what he did next would shock everyone who thought they knew him. John sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wedding ring in his hand. The engraving, Emily and Mike, felt like a knife twisting in his chest. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How could this have happened? How could the two people he trusted most betray him like this? He stumbled out of the bedroom, clutching the ring, and made his way to the kitchen. The house felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. The fridge was stocked with food he didn't recognize, and the calendar on the wall was filled with appointments and notes in Emily's handwriting. John's eyes landed on a date circled in red. June 15th, our wedding day. "Our wedding day," John muttered, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "What the hell is this?" He grabbed his phone and dialed Emily's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Next, he tried Mike. No answer. Frustration boiled over as he slammed his fist on the counter, sending a coffee mug crashing to the floor. John knew he couldn't stay in the house any longer. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to find them sitting in the ruins of his old life. He grabbed his keys and stormed out the door, determined to confront the neighbor who had always been nosy but well-meaning, Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson was watering her plants when John approached. Her eyes widened in surprise, and then her expression softened with pity. "John, oh my goodness, is that you? I heard you were coming home, but I didn't expect to see you so soon." "Mrs. Henderson," John said, his voice tight with emotion. "What's going on? Where's Emily? And why is Mike's car in my driveway?" The old woman hesitated, glancing around as if unsure how much to say. "Oh, John, I don't know how to tell you this, but Emily and Mike, They're married now." The words hit John like a punch to the gut. He staggered back, struggling to process what he just heard. Married? How? When? Mrs. Henderson sighed, setting down her watering can. "It happened about 6 months ago. Emily said she thought you weren't coming back. She was lonely and Mike was always there for her. One thing led to another and, well, you know how these things go." John's hands clenched into fists. "No, I don't know how these things go. She's my wife. He's my best friend. How could they do this to me?" Mrs. Henderson reached out to touch his arm, but he pulled away. "I'm so sorry, John. I really am. But maybe it's better you know the truth." John didn't respond. He turned and walked back to his car, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, pain, betrayal, it all swirled together, threatening to consume him. As he drove aimlessly through the town, memories of his time with Emily and Mike flooded his mind. He remembered the day he proposed to Emily, the way her eyes had lit up, the tears of joy streaming down her face. He remembered Mike standing by his side at the wedding, giving a heartfelt speech about loyalty and friendship. How could those memories mean nothing to them? John's thoughts were interrupted by a text notification. It was from Sarah, his sister. "Hey, big brother, heard you're back in town. Let's meet up soon." For the first time since he'd arrived home, John felt a glimmer of hope. Sarah had always been his rock, the one person he could count on no matter what. He quickly typed a reply, "I need to see you. Now." Within minutes, John was pulling into Sarah's driveway. She was waiting on the porch, her face filled with concern. As soon as he stepped out of the car, she ran to him and wrapped him in a tight hug. "John, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pulling back to study his face. John took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Emily and Mike, they're married." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "What? No, that's impossible. They wouldn't." "They did," John interrupted, his voice breaking. "I found the ring, Sarah, the photos, everything. They've been lying to me this whole time." Sarah's expression hardened. "Those selfish, heartless, how could they do this to you, after everything you've been through?" John shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't know, but I can't just let this go. I need to confront them. I need to make them understand what they've done." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Then we'll do it together. But John, promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't let this destroy you. You're stronger than they are, and no matter what happens, I've got your back." John looked at his sister, gratitude swelling in his chest. For the first time since he discovered the truth, he felt like he wasn't alone. But as he thought about what lay ahead, a cold, hard resolve settled over him. Emily and Mike had taken everything from him. Now it was time to take something back. John stood outside the house, his heart pounding like a drum. The place looked different now, new paint, a fresh garden, and a shiny welcome mat that read the Thompsons. The sight of it made his stomach churn. This was supposed to be his home, his life, but now it belonged to Emily and Mike. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice steady but firm. "Are you sure you want to do this, John? Once you walk through that door, there's no going back." John nodded, his jaw clenched. "I'm sure. They owe me an explanation, and I'm not leaving until I get it." With that, he marched up the steps and knocked on the door hard. For a moment there was silence. Then footsteps. The door creaked open, and there she was, Emily. She froze when she saw him, her face pale with shock. "John, what are you? How are you?" "Surprised to see me," John snapped, his voice cold and sharp. "Or were you hoping I'd never come back?" Emily stammered, her eyes darting nervously behind her. "John, I can explain. Please just let me." "Explain what?" John interrupted, stepping inside without an invitation. "How you married my best friend while I was out there risking my life, or how you thought I'd never find out." The living room was exactly as he remembered it, except now it was filled with Mike's things. His jacket hung on the coat rack, his shoes were by the door, and a framed photo of him and Emily sat on the mantelpiece. John's blood boiled as he picked it up, staring at their smiling faces. "Where is he?" John demanded, turning back to Emily. "Where, Mike?" As if on cue, Mike appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of guilt and fear. "John, I didn't know you were coming home. If I had, I would've." "You would've what?" John shouted, cutting him off. "Told me the truth or just hidden it better." Mike descended the stairs slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "John, please, let's talk about this. We never meant to hurt you." "You never meant to hurt me," John repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You married my wife, Mike. How is that not meant to hurt me?" Emily stepped between them, tears streaming down her face. "John, I'm so sorry. I thought you were gone. I thought you weren't coming back. I was lonely and Mike was there for me. It just happened." "It just happened," John echoed, his voice rising with every word. "You don't just happen to marry someone, Emily. You don't just happen to betray the person who trusted you most." Mike stepped forward, his tone pleading. "John, I know we messed up, but we didn't plan this. It wasn't supposed to go this far." "Oh, really?" John shot back, his eyes blazing with anger. "Then tell me, Mike, when exactly did you decide it was okay to sleep with my wife? Was it before or after you promised to look out for her while I was gone?" Mike flinched, his face red with shame. "John, I never meant to." "Save it," John snapped, cutting him off. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I want to know why. Why did you do this to me? Was I not a good enough friend? Was I not a good enough husband?" Emily reached out to touch his arm, but he jerked away. "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to act like you care about me now." "John, please," Emily begged, her voice breaking. "I never stopped caring about you. I thought you were gone. And when you didn't come back, I didn't know what to do." "So you married my best friend," John said, his tone dripping with disbelief. "That was your solution, to replace me with him." Mike stepped forward again, his voice firm this time. "John, that's enough. We made a mistake, okay? But you don't get to come in here and act like you're the only one who's been hurt. Emily was struggling too. She needed someone and I was there for her. Maybe it was wrong, but it happened. And now we're trying to move on." "Move on," John repeated, his voice rising to a shout. "You think you can just move on from this? You think I'm just going to let this go?" Mike's expression hardened. "What do you want from us, John? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry, we're both sorry, but you can't change what happened. So what are you going to do about it?" For a moment the room was silent. John stared at Mike, his mind racing. What was he going to do? He had spent the last few days drowning in anger and pain, but now, faced with the reality of the situation, he wasn't sure what came next. Finally, John spoke, his voice low and steady. "You want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. I'm going to expose you for the liars and traitors you are. And then I'm going to walk away and never look back." Emily's eyes widened in panic. "John, no, please don't do this. We can work something out. We can." "There's nothing to work out," John interrupted, his tone final. "You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." With that, he turned and walked out the door, Sarah close behind him. As they drove away, John felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a faint glimmer of relief. The confrontation was over, but the battle was just beginning. John sat at Sarah's kitchen table, staring blankly at the cup of coffee she had placed in front of him. The steam rose in delicate swirls, but he didn't notice. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the confrontation with Emily and Mike over and over again. Their excuses, their guilt, their attempts to justify what they had done. It all felt like a twisted nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Sarah sat across from him, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "John, you can't keep bottling this up. Talk to me. What are you thinking?" John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Sarah. Part of me wants to just walk away and forget they exist. But the other part wants to make them pay. I want everyone to know what they did." Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she considered his words. Then let's make it happen. But we need to be smart about this. If you go after them without a plan, you'll just end up looking like the bad guy. John looked up, his eyes meeting hers. What are you saying? I'm saying we need evidence, Sarah replied, her voice firm. Proof that they betrayed you. Something that no one can ignore or dismiss. If you're going to expose them, you need to do it in a way that leaves no room for doubt. John leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Evidence, huh? Like what? Like text messages, emails, photos, anything that shows their relationship started while you were still married, Sarah explained. And if we can get them to admit it, even better. John's mind began to race. He thought about the photos he had found in the house, the wedding ring, the calendar with their wedding date circled in red. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. He needed more. What about social media? John asked, a spark of determination igniting in his chest. Emily used to post everything online. If she and Mike were together while I was gone, there's got to be something there. Sarah's eyes lit up. That's a great idea. Let's start there. And while we're at it, we'll dig into their emails and messages. If they were careless enough to leave evidence lying around, we'll find it. Over the next few days, John and Sarah worked tirelessly to gather everything they could. They scrolled through Emily's social media profiles, screenshotting posts and comments that hinted at her relationship with Mike. They combed through old emails and text messages, piecing together a timeline of their betrayal. It wasn't easy. Every photo, every message, every reminder of what Emily and Mike had done felt like a fresh wound. But John pushed through the pain, fueled by a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. One evening, as they sat surrounded by stacks of printed messages and photos, Sarah turned to John with a serious expression. John, there's something you need to think about. Once we expose them, there's no going back. Their lives will be ruined. Are you sure you're ready for that? John hesitated, staring at the evidence spread out before him. He thought about Emily's tearful apologies, Mike's guilt-ridden face, and the life they had built together at his expense. Then he thought about the years he had spent serving his country, the sacrifices he had made, and the trust they had shattered. I'm sure, John said finally, his voice steady. They made their choice. Now they get to live with the consequences. Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Then let's make it count. Together they began to craft a plan. They decided to create a video, a heartfelt, raw account of John's story, backed by the evidence they had gathered. They would post it online, letting the world see the truth for themselves. But they didn't stop there. Sarah suggested reaching out to a social media influencer she knew, someone with a large following who could help amplify the story. If we want this to go viral, we need to make sure as many people see it as possible, she explained. John agreed, though the idea of sharing his pain with the world made him nervous. What if people don't believe me? He asked. They will, Sarah assured him, because you're telling the truth, and the truth always comes out in the end. As the days turned into weeks, John felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. For the first time since he had returned home, he felt like he had a purpose. This wasn't just about getting back at Emily and Mike. It was about reclaiming his life, his dignity, and his future. But as the plan took shape, John couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. Exposing Emily and Mike would bring him closure, but it wouldn't erase the pain they had caused. And deep down, he knew that no amount of revenge could truly heal the wounds they had left behind. Still, as he sat at Sarah's kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, John felt a flicker of hope. This was his chance to take back control, and no matter what happened next, he wasn't going to let it go to waste. John sat in front of Sarah's laptop, staring at the video he had just finished editing. It was raw, emotional, and brutally honest, a 5-minute account of his deployment, his return home, and the betrayal that had shattered his life. The evidence was all there. The photos, the messages, the wedding ring. Everything he needed to expose Emily and Mike for who they truly were. Sarah stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Are you ready for this?" she asked softly. John took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the upload button. "I have to be." With a click, the video went live. John had titled it simply, "The Truth About My Wife and Best Friend." He shared it on every platform he could think of: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then sat back, his heart pounding as he waited for the first reactions. It didn't take long. Within minutes, comments began pouring in. "This is heartbreaking. How could they do this to him? Emily and Mike are monsters. They deserve everything coming to them. John, you're a hero. Stay strong." The video spread like wildfire. Friends, family, and even strangers shared it, their outrage fueling its reach. By the end of the first hour, it had thousands of views. By the end of the day, it had gone viral. John watched in stunned silence as the numbers climbed. He had expected some backlash, but nothing like this. People were furious on his behalf, and their support was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Emily and Mike were scrambling. Emily's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, angry messages, hateful comments, and demands for an explanation. She tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. The video was everywhere, and there was no escaping it. Mike, on the other hand, tried to defend himself. He posted a hastily written statement on his social media, claiming that John's video was misleading and that there were two sides to every story. But it only made things worse. The comments under Mike's post were brutal. "Two sides. You married his wife while he was serving our country. There's no excuse for that. You're a disgrace, Mike. I hope you're proud of yourself. John deserves better than friends like you." As the backlash grew, Emily and Mike's lives began to unravel. Emily was fired from her job after her employer received countless complaints about her involvement in the scandal. Mike's business took a hit as clients pulled out, unwilling to be associated with someone who had betrayed his best friend. Even their social circle turned against them. Friends they had known for years stopped returning their calls, and neighbors avoided them like the plague. The once happy couple found themselves isolated, their lives crumbling under the weight of their own choices. But the final blow came when a popular social media influencer picked up the story. With millions of followers, the influencer's post reached an even wider audience. She shared John's video along with a heartfelt caption. "This is what betrayal looks like. John Carter served our country with honor, only to come home to this. Let's make sure his story is heard." The response was explosive. John's video racked up millions of views, and the hashtag #JusticeForJohn began trending worldwide. People from all walks of life reached out to offer their support, sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. For John, the outpouring of love and solidarity was overwhelming. He had expected anger and outrage, but he hadn't anticipated the kindness. Strangers sent him messages of encouragement, veterans shared their own experiences, and even celebrities weighed in, calling Emily and Mike out for their actions. But amidst the chaos, John couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This wasn't how he had imagined his life would turn out. He had wanted a quiet homecoming, a chance to rebuild his life with the people he loved. Instead, he was at the center of a global firestorm, his pain laid bare for the world to see. Sarah noticed his somber expression and sat down beside him. "You did the right thing, John. They needed to be held accountable." John nodded, but his voice was heavy with emotion. "I know, but it doesn't change what happened. No amount of revenge can undo the damage they caused." Sarah placed a hand on his arm, her tone gentle. "Maybe not, but you've taken back your power. You've shown them and the world that you won't be silenced, and that's something to be proud of." John smiled faintly, grateful for her support. But as he scrolled through the endless comments and messages, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The video had exposed Emily and Mike, but it had also exposed him, his pain, his vulnerability, his humanity. And as much as he wanted to move on, he knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. The scars of betrayal ran deep, and healing would take time. But for now, John allowed himself a small moment of triumph. He had fought back and he had won. Emily and Mike's lives were in shambles, and the world knew the truth. As he closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, John felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone. The fallout from John's video was swift and merciless. Within days, Emily and Mike found themselves at the center of a storm they couldn't escape. The world had turned against them, and there was no going back. Emily sat on the couch, her phone clutched in her trembling hands. The screen was flooded with notifications, angry messages, hateful comments, and endless tags in posts calling her out for what she had done. She had tried to ignore it at first, but the weight of the backlash was crushing. "Mike, we need to do something," she said, her voice shaking. "People are saying horrible things about us. They're calling us monsters." Mike paced the room, his face pale and drawn. "What do you want me to do, Emily? I already tried to explain, and it only made things worse. There's no winning this." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "But we can't just sit here and let this happen. Our lives are falling apart." Mike stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression a mix of anger and despair. "And whose fault is that, Emily? We did this to ourselves. We made our choices, and now we have to live with them." Emily flinched, his words cutting deeper than any online comment. She had always been able to rely on Mike, but now even he seemed distant, as if the weight of their actions had driven a wedge between them. The next few days were a blur of chaos and despair. Emily lost her job after her employer received countless complaints about her involvement in the scandal. Mike's business took a nosedive as clients pulled out, unwilling to be associated with someone who had betrayed his best friend. Even their social circle turned against them. Friends they had known for years stopped returning their calls, and neighbors avoided them like the plague. The once happy couple found themselves isolated, their lives crumbling under the weight of their own choices. One evening, as they sat in silence at the dinner table, Emily broke down. "I can't do this anymore, Mike. I can't handle the hate, the constant reminders of what we did. It's too much." Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Emily, but what choice do we have? We can't undo what happened. All we can do is try to move forward." "Move forward," Emily repeated, her voice rising with desperation. "How can we move forward when our lives are in ruins, when everyone hates us?" Mike didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, John watched the fallout from a distance. He had expected some backlash, but the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Emily and Mike's lives were in shambles, and while part of him felt a grim sense of satisfaction, another part couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Sarah noticed his conflicted expression and sat down beside him. "You did the right thing, John. They needed to be held accountable." John nodded, but his voice was heavy with emotion. "I know, but seeing their lives fall apart, it's not as satisfying as I thought it would be." Sarah placed a hand on his arm, her tone gentle. "That's because you're a good person, John. You didn't do this out of malice. You did it because you needed closure, and now you have it." John sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Closure doesn't feel the way I thought it would. It doesn't erase the pain or the memories. It just is." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe closure isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about accepting what happened and finding a way to move on." John was silent for a moment, considering her words. Then he smiled faintly. "When did you get so wise?" Sarah laughed, the sound lightening the mood. "I've always been wise, you just never noticed." As the days turned into weeks, John began to find a sense of peace. The support from strangers, veterans, and even celebrities had been overwhelming, but it had also given him a new sense of purpose. He realized that his story had resonated with so many people because it was a story of resilience, of standing up for oneself, and of finding strength in the face of betrayal. But for Emily and Mike, there was no such peace. Their lives continued to spiral out of control, the consequences of their actions becoming more and more unbearable. One evening, as Emily sat alone in the darkened living room, she received a text from an unknown number. It was a link to an article titled "The Fall of Emily and Mike," a cautionary tale of betrayal. She clicked on it, her heart sinking as she read. The article detailed their downfall, painting them as villains and John as the hero. The comments were even worse, with people calling for them to be shunned forever. Emily dropped her phone, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt so alone, so broken. Mike found her there, curled up on the couch, her sobs echoing through the empty house. He sat down beside her, his own eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said quietly, "for everything." Emily looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think we'll ever be able to move on from this?" Mike hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know, but we have to try, for our own sake if nothing else." Emily nodded, though she didn't feel convinced. The weight of their actions was too heavy, the consequences too severe. As they sat there in silence, the world continued to move on without them. John's story had become a rallying cry for those who had been wronged, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way forward. But for Emily and Mike, the road ahead was uncertain. They had made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences. And as the night stretched on, they couldn't help but wonder if they would ever find a way to rebuild what they had lost. The weeks following the viral explosion of John's video were a whirlwind of emotions. While Emily and Mike struggled to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, John found himself on a different path, one of healing, reflection, and, ultimately, redemption. He sat on the porch of Sarah's house, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the sun rise over the quiet neighborhood. The world felt calmer now, the storm of anger and betrayal giving way to a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Sarah joined him, sitting in the chair beside him. "You've been quiet lately," she said, her tone gentle. "How are you holding up?" John took a sip of his coffee, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I'm okay. Better than I was, at least. It's strange, though. I thought exposing them would make me feel better, and it did for a while. But now I just feel empty." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's because revenge isn't the same as healing. You've done what you needed to do, but now it's time to focus on yourself, to figure out what comes next." John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't even know where to start. My whole life feels like it's been turned upside down." "Then start small," Sarah suggested. "What's something you've always wanted to do but never had the chance?" John thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I've always wanted to help other veterans, people who have been through what I've been through, losing everything they cared about while serving their country. Maybe I could do something for them." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea, John. You have a story that could inspire so many people, and you have the platform to make a real difference." Over the next few weeks, John threw himself into the idea. He reached out to local veterans organizations, sharing his story and offering to help in any way he could. He started a nonprofit called Second Chances, aimed at providing support and resources to veterans struggling with betrayal, loss, and reintegration into civilian life. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, and volunteers signed up to help. John found himself at the center of a movement, one that gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his days in the military. But it wasn't just about helping others. It was about healing himself. One evening, as he sat in his new office, a small space donated by a local business, John received an unexpected visitor. It was Emily. She stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with regret. "John, can we talk?" For a moment, John was speechless. He hadn't seen or spoken to Emily since the confrontation at her house, and the sight of her now brought back a flood of emotions. "What are you doing here, Emily?" he asked, his voice steady but guarded. Emily stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I needed to see you, to apologize for everything." John leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You already apologized, and it didn't change anything." "I know," Emily said, her voice breaking, "but I needed to say it again, to your face. What I did to you, it was unforgivable, and I've spent every day since your video came out regretting it." John was silent for a moment, studying her. She looked different, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her actions had worn her down. "Why now?" he asked finally. "Why come here after all this time?" Emily hesitated, then sighed. "Because I realized something. All this time I've been focused on how much I hurt you, but I never stopped to think about why I did it. And the truth is, I was scared. Scared of being alone, scared of losing you, scared of facing the world without you. And instead of dealing with those fears, I ran away. And I hurt you in the process." John's expression softened, though his guard remained up. "Emily, I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the pain." "I know," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "And I don't expect it to. I needed you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, and that I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. Not for my sake, but for yours, because carrying that anger, it's not good for you." John looked at her, his own eyes filling with tears. "I'll get there, Emily, but it's going to take time." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand, and I'll respect that. I wanted you to know." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving John alone with his thoughts. For a long time he sat there, staring at the closed door. Emily's words echoed in his mind, stirring up emotions he had tried to bury. Anger, sadness, regret, but also faintly a sense of closure. Later that night, as he sat on the porch with Sarah, John told her about Emily's visit. Sarah listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" she asked. John sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know, maybe someday, but not yet. Right now, I'm focused on moving forward, on building something good out of all this pain." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "And you're doing an amazing job, John. I'm so proud of you." John smiled back, a sense of peace settling over him. The road ahead was still long, and the scars of betrayal would always be there. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. He had taken back control of his life, and in doing so, he had found a new purpose, a new beginning. And as the sun set over the quiet neighborhood, John knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them.